All right. Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it. Hey, everyone. Nice to meet you virtually. Thanks for having me today. I was kind of putting some thought into, what should we talk about? What's top of mind in the current state? And it's kind of interesting. For me, it's almost like I'm talking to myself 15 years ago. I feel really old, but it's still kind of interesting. I've learned a lot in the last 15 years, and I'm excited to tell you guys a little bit about what I learned, what my career path has looked like from, graduating Bentley to today. And then also kind of just, some of the life lessons that I've kind of picked up along the way. I will start by saying, like, I want this to be interactive. I do have a slot for Q&A, but if anyone has questions, feel free to come off mute. Feel free to type in the chat. I'll do my best to monitor it. But we'll get started. So, quick slide about who am I? I'm like an adrenaline junkie. I love snowboarding and surfing and mountain climbing. I kind of chuckled to myself as I put this fish photo because I know it's kind of taboo, but I don't care. We caught this actually almost a year ago off my friend's boat. It was like the highlight of my year. Also a family man. I'm really close to my family. I'm originally from Connecticut. I live in Hawaii right now, but do my best to stay in touch with them. I usually go back to Connecticut 3 or 4 times a year. It's quite a bit of travel, but still making them my priority. And then I thought I might get a couple of chuckles out of the Stoke Master. That's what my girlfriend calls me. But like, I'm just stoked on life. Every single day there's things to be excited about. Every single day there's, you know, components of your attitude and mindset that you can control. I intentionally try to be excited about things, even like going on walks, smelling flowers, watching sunsets, random stuff like that. I think it's a big part of my life, and it makes me really happy, to be alive, to be on this planet. I'll talk a little bit. This is probably the longest slide, but I want to talk you guys through, you know, my life after Bentley. I would imagine, any seniors in the room, this is probably top of mind. Maybe some of you guys have jobs already. Maybe some of you are still trying to figure that out. Don't stress about it. Like, you're still young. My story, I think, is a pretty good example of, you know, how you can be successful in a career, even if you're unsure of exactly what you want to do when you graduate. So, graduated in 2010. We were still kind of in the wake of the 2008 financial situation. Job market was, pretty bleak. Basically, my whole time at Bentley, my whole college education, my goal was to work on Wall Street. That, to me, at the time, was one of the most lucrative careers. It was high energy. It was, kind of flashy and kind of like this highly sought after career. I interviewed with Morgan Stanley. I actually got an offer from them. Interviewed with Goldman, ended up not getting an offer from them. But I was talking actually to one of my dad's friends who worked on Wall Street for like 30 years, and he was basically like, what are your options right now? I'm like, basically, I can move to New York City and work in finance. Or my girlfriend, who I actually, at the time, who I met at Bentley, she was actually moving to California in the City Year program. I think it's actually affiliated with Bentley. I'm not sure if you guys have heard about it. It's kind of like a Teach for America sort of thing. And she took that opportunity, and she was moving to California either way. So I was basically like, I can work on Wall Street, or I can move to California with my college girlfriend with $5 grand in my bank account and no plan whatsoever. And he was like, move to California. He was very bald at the time. He's like, look at my hair. This is what your hair is going to look like in 10 years working on Wall Street. Like, it's not what it used to be. So long story short, that's what I did. I packed up my car. Actually, my roommate from Bentley came out, drove from Connecticut to San Jose, California. And I was unemployed. I needed a job. So I basically started, applying through the traditional means. Long story short, I got a job at Enterprise Rent-A-Car, which, people will kind of give me some crap about, but I have no shame whatsoever about my first job. It taught me a ton of really valuable skills interacting with the public face to face, high pressure kind of sales. Like, if any of you guys have rented a rental car recently, they're probably trying to sell you, supplemental car insurance. That's basically what I was selling. It's not sexy. It's kind of uncomfortable, but it kind of got me in this like sales mindset of pitching value, handling objections, and ultimately doing what's best for the customer. So I worked for enterprise, I think for about like a year and a half. Um, I kind of knew that it wasn't what I wanted for my career long term. You know, I was vacuuming cars in a suit, like my tie getting sucked in the vacuum, working early Saturday mornings, early Sunday mornings. Um, but so I kind of started looking for my next gig, which was a company called FlashBay. Basically, they're a logo branded flash drive company. It was started by this German dude out of his dorm room in college. He basically bought a screen printer and was buying flash drives in bulk and screen printing company logos on these flash drives, whether it's like Microsoft. Indeed was one of our big customers. And I heard about this, or, I basically got recruited for this job at FlashBay from one of my old managers at Enterprise. So I started that company. I was there for like 3.5 years. It was basically like a meat grinder kind of sales organization. You had 3 months. Your first 3 months, you were basically on probation, which means you need to hit your quota in the first 3 months. Otherwise, you no longer have a job here. And it was high stress, high pressure. You had to close $26,000 worth of profit every month. That was my quota. So like, month one, I was pretty low. Month two, I came back up higher. Month three, I think I finished at like $24,000. So like $2,000 short of quota. It was me and another new hire, basically fighting neck and neck. He performed worse than me on the third month. They basically fired him and gave me all his accounts. And at that point, I was kind of set. Like there was a ton of orders coming in. I was making a ton of outbound calls, closing deals. And I did that for about 3.5 years. Things have changed in terms of like money and salaries and inflation and all that kind of stuff. But like back then, like I thought I was balling. I bought a Beamer, I was going out all the time, buying out the bar, going to nice restaurants. Looking back on it, I was not balling, right? Like I was not investing enough money. I was spending too much money on stupid non-asset kind of stuff. And I think that's probably why I stayed here for so long. But eventually I kind of realized that if I want a real job in tech, I need to work for like a large software company that has, brand value, brand recognition. And so long story short, I actually started at Oracle. I met one of my still good friends to this day, Daniel. I met him at Enterprise back in 2010. We had kind of taken different career paths, but he was at Oracle. I was actually interviewing with LinkedIn at the time. And he said, hey, come interview with us. I'll introduce you to my VP. We have 3 open headcount on the team. And so that's what I did. Long story short, I did not get the offer from LinkedIn, but I did get the offer from Oracle. So I ended up working at Oracle for about a year and a half. I kind of knew that it was more of a jump off point for my career to get into a big tech company or a different kind of tech company. Oracle, for those that know, is a huge software company. I think they employ like 150,000 people across the globe, tons of red tape, tons of politics, huge hierarchy. So just really difficult to get anything done there, right? In sales, it's pretty important to be agile and fast when your customers need something, and kind of like working through all the process at Oracle was just, it was frustrating and slow and annoying. So I basically did my time there. I did a year and a half. I met a lot of good people. I learned a lot. But that, I knew this was going to be a temporary kind of thing. So the way that sales works, for those of you guys that don't know, is you're typically assigned a territory. Usually it's a geographic territory. And so when I was at Oracle, my territory was kind of all over the place, but part of my territory was small startups in Soma, in San Francisco, which is south of Market Street, that had an odd zip code. And so I was spending a lot of time prospecting into companies in Soma with odd zip codes. And I was actually driving back from my commute to work, and I saw a billboard for WalkMe. I don't know if anyone's heard about WalkMe. I'd be surprised if you guys have. But I was like, oh, interesting, cool. Like, let me check them out. Let me see if there might be an opportunity to work together at Oracle. So I took the woman to lunch. Her name was Devin Blaze. She was the chief people officer. We had a really good rapport. She was like, hey, I'll be straight up with you. I'm not going to buy anything Oracle anytime soon. But we really like you. We want to come in, we want to have you come in and meet the team. We're hiring sales reps right now. I was still of the mindset, like, yeah, let's just keep building rapport with Devin. I'm going to still sell her Oracle, whatever. Long story short, they sold me more than I sold them. So I started working here in June of 2016. So when I first started at WalkMe, it was like, I think there was 10 sales reps in the US. We had an awesome office in San Francisco. Every sales rep was crushing their number. I think I was employee like 50. Now we have over 1,000 employees. I started as an enterprise sales rep. And so typically an organization will have a go-to-market team, which is typically sales team. They'll usually split up the personnel in that go-to-market team based on certain verticals or segments. So when I say enterprise account executive, basically we were selling to companies between 1,000 and 20,000 employees. Anything below that would be considered mid-market or commercial, small companies, and anything above that would be strategic or named accounts. So those are the accounts like a Microsoft or a Salesforce or a ServiceNow. So I was in the enterprise role for about 4 years. I was #1 rep in the world for enterprise 3 years in a row. And I think like one of the main things that attributed to my success was continuing to keep relationships with people that you've already sold to. So back then we had a ton of inbound leads. We had a ton of people buying. It was like everyone hitting their quota, everyone making a lot of money. And kind of the culture at that time was, you close a deal, you throw it over the fence, and then you try to close another deal. So I would close a deal, throw it over the fence, but I would still be very involved in those daily meetings, making sure those customers that bought our software were actually going to be successful. Because what ends up happening with the majority of organizations that I sell into is that they'll start small, they'll implement, make sure it's actually, the tool or the solution is doing what it's supposed to, and then they'll buy more of it. And when they buy more of it, typically those are the really big deals. In sales, we call it land and expand. It's kind of like cringe to hear it, but like for those of you guys that are not in the loop with sales, that's kind of what they call it. So anyways, I kept like Moody's, for example. I started working with Moody's with like a 35K deal. And by the end of it, I think they were spending like $2 million a year with our software. So I did that for 4 years. I got promoted into management. So I managed a commercial team for about 2 years, did really well there. And then I got promoted to be an enterprise sales director. So I was managing a team of 6 enterprise reps, covering some of the biggest companies in the US. So I did that for about 2 years. So individual contributor for 4, manager for another 4. Long story short, our company, so actually we IPO'd about 2.5 years ago. So like everyone flew to New York City, we rang the bell. It was, crazy, awesome time. We opened at $32 a share. Within like 3 months, I think we were trading at like $20 a share. And then, basically trending downward. We IPO'd at a pretty tough time. And then we got bought out by SAP for $15 a share. That's I think it was 1.5 billion. So SAP bought us. My management said, hey, we want leadership in the Bay Area or in New York City or in Raleigh. So basically you have a couple different options. I don't know if I mentioned this, but I live in Hawaii. I actually moved to Hawaii basically 1 week into COVID. I love it here. I'm never leaving. I'm super happy. And so my leadership was like, look, you can move back to the Bay and keep your enterprise director job. You can live in, stay in Hawaii and go back to being an account executive. You can move to Tokyo and run a sales team there, which just sounded like terrifying to me because I don't speak the language or know the culture or really anything. Or, we can negotiate some kind of package and you can exit the business and do something else. So I decided to become that named or strategic rep, which, so like just to give you guys an example, as a named rep now, I have ServiceNow as a customer, I have Microsoft, I have Intel, I have Nike, some of the biggest customers or companies in the world. And so I've been in this role for now, this is my 4th month in the role. Last month, I closed the biggest deal of my life to date with ServiceNow, north of $6.5 million. And so my decision to go back to being a rep and back to selling to these big accounts is starting to prove itself as the right decision. I like the work better. Management, I'm not knocking management, but it's definitely a different day-to-day, a different skill set, a lot of empathy, sympathy, a lot of like therapy. And so I'm much happier now in my individual contributor role. I get to do what I love to do. And I'm really happy to be back in this role. I'll take a quick pause. Any questions from the group so far?
So if you have a question, please unmute and just ask, or type it in chat and I'll read it. I'll read it out.
Cool. All right, so I kind of chuckled to myself. I was trying to like think of Gen Z terms when I was creating this deck, and this is probably the best I could come up with. But I have a question for the group, and the question kind of comes from me reflecting back on my experience at Bentley. I didn't even know there were sales careers in tech. I had no idea what they looked like. It wasn't even really on my radar. So I'm going to ask the group, like, put a 1 in the chat if you've ever considered a career in sales, and put a 2 in the chat if it never even crossed your mind. All right, I guess a bit of a mix. So like one of the key takeaways that I want you all to walk away with is that there are a ton of really good jobs in tech that do not surround like technical engineering skills or developer skills, right? Like with I kind of laughed to myself, like my major was corporate finance and accounting and computer information systems. When I used to go on an interview, I would say, this is what I studied. The main thing that I learned was that I don't really like any of these, right? I don't like finance. I hate accounting. Sorry for any accounting majors. And I suck at computer science. JavaScript was basically where I drew the line, but I didn't even know that a career in sales existed. And so I wanted you guys to kind of hopefully come out of this call with a new option for what you guys are considering for your career path. So I'll kind of give you guys a bit of a breakdown in terms of pros and cons for working in sales. It's lucrative. Like many people that I work closely with are making 7-figure W-2s, which is pretty hard to find these days unless you're basically an entrepreneur building your own company. Or you're getting in super early days with a startup that ends up doing extremely well, which is rare. The other piece of this, so like the way that the compensation works for sales, you have base salary and you have commission. So every time you close a deal, you get a certain percentage in the paycheck based on how big that deal was. So let's say you close $1 million deal and your commission rate is 10%, that's $100K in your bank account. So very lucrative from that perspective, but also lucrative from an equity perspective. And this was something that I don't think I really paid enough attention to when I was younger, which is that, you obviously make a paycheck, you make a W-2, but you also have company stock. When you start working for a company, 100% you should be getting some stock in that company or equity in that company. Typically it will be like a 4-year vest. So just for example, when I started at WalkMe, my first stock options grant was 5,000 shares at 43 cents per share. Since then, I've gotten like 10 more options grants, but those equity options end up, as long as the company does well, they end up being extremely valuable. Like if you look at, San Francisco is kind of changed a little bit in terms of like the real estate market and just the population and who lives there. But like you would see, 23, 24-year-old people that work at Google or Facebook or Snowflake, buying $5 million houses on the hill in San Francisco. And you're kind of like, how do these people have so much money? They're so young. The way they have so much money is through equity. So one thing that I'll leave you guys with, like whenever you're negotiating a job offer, always ask for more equity. The worst they can say is no. They're not going to, dock you for trying to negotiate. And it's the path to make a lot of money quickly. Let me see. I think there's a question maybe. Mark, you want to just cut me off if there's questions?
So one question is, would you say your job is competitive, and how do you handle the stress?
Yeah, it's definitely competitive. I think there's like 80 sales reps throughout the world, and basically everyone knows where everyone's standing all the time. And I will admit, like when you're not performing, it is stressful. It makes you question things. Am I doing things right? Am I spending my time in the right way? Is my strategy correct? Am I positioning this, deal to the right people the right way? One of the ways I deal with stress is working out. So I'm a runner. I run 10 marathons. I ran a 50-mile race a few years ago. That's a great stress reliever. I'll be a little careful here, but like, I used to drink too. Like it was never like a problem for me. I was never an alcoholic, but when you have a really stressful day at work, it's kind of just like commonplace to come home, crack a beer, make a martini, whatever it is. I don't drink anymore. I've been sober for like 5 months. Which I'm really happy about. Highly recommend it. I know I may be talking to the wrong crowd here, but sobriety is really great. I recommend trying it. For me, it was I want to do a personal challenge, and I also want to see what life is like without it. So in terms of managing stress, I would say those were the two main things. But over time, it becomes less and less stressful. Right? Like when I first started at WalkMe, I was like, trying as hard as I possibly could. It was like, I need to hit my quota. If I don't, it's going to be the end of the world. I'm going to lose my job. I'm going to be homeless. And so I was really stressed out at that time. Like end of the quarter for me was a pretty highly stressful time. But these days, I'm not really stressed out. I think it kind of just comes with the territory that there's going to be stress in the role, but you also just have to kind of know how to deal with it. I don't know if that was helpful or not. All right, I'll keep going through. It's really rewarding. Like so I closed a deal last Monday. It was the last day of Q1. The feeling that you get when you close a big deal, like I honestly don't think like it's not something that you can buy, and it's also not something that you can find in a lot of other careers. As far as I'm concerned anyways, like when you close a deal, it's like you just won a sporting event or you just did something huge. It's kind of hard to find those like very clean cut rewarding experiences. If you're an accountant, maybe the most rewarding experience if you're a tax accountant is to like close the season and then like be able to breathe again. I really like sales because it's constantly rewarding as long as you're doing the right things. It's binary. What I mean by this is like your performance is very visible to everyone. And it's like, if you're hitting your numbers and doing well, you're being praised. And if you're not, it's kind of embarrassing, right? But the benefit of that is where you stand, right? It's not like some of these project manager roles or whatever it might be where you have a performance review once a year. They're like, yeah, here are your strengths, here are your weaknesses, areas of opportunity. Sales is like, here's your number, and here's how many dollars you've closed up until that point as it relates to that number. So really helpful just to kind of like have that either peace of mind or like kick in the butt. Like you gotta change things. You gotta get your numbers up. I did say balanced, and I said balanced because it is a really good work-life balance career. there are certain times where it'll be extremely demanding. Like 2 weekends ago, I was on 6 a.m. calls with ServiceNow executives and SAP executives trying to close this deal. But when you're working on a deal like that, it's a lot easier to stay motivated, to stay present, and to do the work. When you have a bit of a slow time, typically we'll have a slow time at the beginning of the quarter. It's not the case now. We're just insanely busy. But a lot of folks choose to be an individual contributor in sales for their career because they want to go to their kids' sport games. They want to be able to take a nice vacation. They want to be able to, be home with their family at a certain time. So I really enjoy the work-life balance. It's also just fun. Like I work with a ton of great people. Salespeople, I think, they typically have a certain personality. They're usually loud, they're social, they want to go out, they're funny. And so I really enjoy, kind of the culture of a sales floor. Cons, it is stressful. Like I'm not gonna lie. I will say, you kind of have to find your own way to manage it. But it is important to detach from work, especially I think like at a younger age, because I was really bad at this when I was younger. I would kind of just like be so distracted by this number and so, feel all this pressure, which is stressful. So, something to keep in mind if you are considering a career in sales, it is demanding, right? Like today, this is I'm basically back to back from 5 a.m. my time to 2 p.m. my time. Back to back meetings. And, you got to kind of be willing to put in the work to be successful. So I had binary here both. It's great when your numbers are great, and it's not so great when your numbers are bad, right? But again, just kind of a constant reminder that, hey, everyone knows what your job is. Your job is to hit your quota, and everyone knows, how well you're doing at that. Can be frustrating, right? Like these kind of go to hand in hand. You get a lot of no's. You end up learning how to roll with the punches. You end up being more confident, even if you are getting a no. You end up, kind of believing that what you're doing is right, even if it's not necessarily working every single time. But you do have to, be able to deal with rejection, if you want a career in sales, because you're going to be rejected for sure. I'll take another pause. See, I'll open the chat. Okay, still no questions. Any questions?
Feel free to type in a question or comment for Ryan in the chat now. Do you have the same sort of day-to-day routine, or does that change based on who your clients and are, what you're working on?
Yeah, I mean, like these days, my calendar is pretty full. With the SAP acquisition, the SAP acquisition means a lot more meetings with a lot of SAP folks, which I personally enjoy. But these days, I would say it's like 25% of my day is internal meetings, talking about deal strategy, talking about who else we can get involved. Probably another 25% is spent actually, writing emails to customers, sitting on meetings with customers, and then the rest is usually like prep, SAP stuff, training, all that kind of stuff. But really, really it changes every day, right? Like this week, my whole calendar is completely full. In 2 weeks, my calendar will be pretty empty. So it's like, when your calendar is full, you need to really manage your time correctly and intelligently. When your calendar is empty, it's almost even more important to be cognizant of how you're managing your time, because you can do whatever you want, right? You can spend time prospecting people on LinkedIn. You can spend time, looking for other connections within some of your customers. You can spend time writing cold emails, making cold calls. You can spend your time laying on the couch watching TV, right? So it's like really important that you stay regimented and disciplined, and kind of manage your time correctly. I'm just reading the question.
There was a question. Natalia, would you like to unmute and read your question to us?
I can read it as well if she can hear.
She says, Thank you for talking with us today. You've talked about a couple of times when you've had to make important decisions like moving to California after college and going back to being a sales rep. In what ways
Yeah.
have these experiences shaped the way you analyze information before making decisions? And have you seen any impact of your tech background on the way you approach them
Yeah.
now?
So I believe it was Bezos who said like something about when I'm making a decision, I'll ask my future self if that was the right decision or not. And I try to like employ that quite a bit in my day-to-day decision making. The when I moved to California, I was kind of just young and dumb and didn't know what to do. And California sounded better than Boston, to be honest. And just like an adventure, right? Like I had never been to California. I always was kind of intrigued by the West Coast. And so that was kind of, I would say, less thought out and more kind of just like off the cuff, sort of like impulsive move. The going from management to back to being a sales rep was a lot harder of a decision to make. I weighed my options a lot more thoroughly, than I did when I was talking about moving to California. But I tried to picture myself in the role. Okay, so I'm going to be a named rep. I'm going to be working with SAP. SAP, like basically 88% of the companies in the world are SAP customers. And a lot of these big accounts are going to have a huge SAP footprint. So knowing that, the accounts that I was getting, which again, huge companies, Microsoft, ServiceNow, Nike, NVIDIA, I think I forgot that one. I actually have a meeting with NVIDIA right after this. I do have a hard stop at whatever time it is, I think 3. I just pictured myself basically right now, 3, 4 months into the role. How am I going to be feeling? How am I going to be doing? Will I be happy? Will I regret the decision? And ultimately, I made that decision, and it was the right decision for me. The management stuff was kind of weighing on me. It was kind of weighing me down. I've had, people that I manage come to me with all sorts of crazy excuses and stories that you guys would never even want to hear. But weigh the options, weigh the risk, picture yourself in the future, looking back on the decision you made, and ask yourself, did I make the right decision? I would say is my best advice. And then impact on tech background and the way you approach them. I would say like my tech background, but also just like my personality in general, like who I am. Like my girlfriend says like I'm the most Aries person that she's ever met, which like I'm not into horoscopes or whatever. But it's kind of like when I set out to do something, I'm going to do it. When I make my mind about something, I'm going to commit to that decision and do the best that I possibly can to be successful. That's kind of just another thing, which is, and I'll actually talk about this in one of my next slides, but like you guys have a ton of options. Like you're all smart, you're going to be successful. Just because you made a decision, maybe that you wish was a different decision, like you can be quick on your feet, you can pivot, you can find, a new opportunity or a new business idea or whatever it is. You guys are so young. Like it's crazy to me to think like I'm talking, like I can't even imagine talking to myself 15 years ago after, all of the life experience, career experience, good, bad, and ugly that's happened. So like you guys are young. Don't be scared to make the wrong decision. You have a ton of time to, kind of course correct if it ends up not being not being the right decision. Thanks for the question, Natalia. All right, so I'll move on. So this is kind of like, you guys may be laughing at me. Like I've kind of turned into like a loving hippie over the last few years, just like being super grateful. I blame it on living in Hawaii. Like aloha is real. I'm just like super happy, but these are some of the things that I would have told my 22-year-old self 15 years ago if I had the opportunity. So, kind of along the same lines as what I was just saying is like your first job doesn't have to be the last one. So, and also like just in general, it's pretty crazy to me that like the expectation is you're picking your major at age 18, you're going to go through with 4 years of college, graduate, and get a job in that field, right? Like, if you guys don't know what you want to do, don't worry about it. Like, a lot of people don't know what they want to do, even at my age. Like, I have friends that have switched industries and careers many times, and they still don't really know what they want to do. Like, don't I think there's less weight on this first career decision than I thought there was when I was in your guys' shoes. So don't stress about it. Like, it's gonna be fine. And you still have options. Even with me, like, I've been in the industry for 13, 14 years. If I wanted to make a career change right now, I'm pretty confident that I could. This is something that my dad always taught me. Find a job that you don't hate that makes good money. And I think that's like, I still kind of live by that advice. I think it's really sound. Um, at the end of the day, a job is a job, right? Like, I think it's very rare, and I don't want to like discourage anyone, but I do think it's pretty rare to like find a career doing something that you really, really love, right? Like, maybe you love coding. Okay, cool. Like, go be an engineer and whatever. But on the other side of it, and I've had jobs that I've hated before. Like, it really sucks waking up every day going to a job that you don't like. So don't do that. Like, highly, highly recommend against working in a job that you don't like, especially again at this age. Be nice to people, right? Like, I think, especially at Oracle, I would say like there's kind of, I'm trying to find like a PC way to say this, but there's kind of like an ego battle a lot, and people can be rude to each other. People can dismiss other people and just be super egotistical and rude. Don't be that person. It doesn't get you very far in life or in your career. And I think this is one of the reasons why I've been so successful, is that like I try to put myself in people's shoes. I try to understand like what is really important to them. And I use that information, to do my job better. Also, just random people, like if you say hi to someone walking down the street, it's going to brighten both of your days. It probably sounds cheesy, but like it's the way to live your life. If you're mean to people, it's just like, it's going to bring you down. It's going to bring other people down. And so I highly recommend being nice to people. So I'll move to my next bullet point. Be smart with your money. I kind of learned this the hard way 1, 2, 3 years out of college. Credit cards, sweet. I can go buy a BMW. I can go to this Michelin star restaurant. Once you look at how much you have to pay in taxes, once you have to, all the money that you have to spend just like on cost of living, whether it's your mortgage and your car and your gas and your food and your entertainment, all this kind of stuff, like those bills and those taxes add up really fast. So like, don't spend more than you earn and invest money. Like, you guys have time on your side. Like, I still think that I do. But the longer your investments sit, if we're talking about the market, like even just buying the S&P now, in, your 50s, 60s, whatever, like that account's going to be a 7-figure account and you're not going to have to do anything. So like, don't make the same mistake that I did and a lot of my friends did, which is like, I had like 8 grand on a credit card at one point. I have no debt anymore except for my mortgage, but it took me a while to pay off my student loan, and it took me a while to pay off my credit card debt. And the reason was because like I thought I was more balling than I really was. Right. So be smart with your money. Don't max out credit cards. Don't spend money that you can't have. Prioritize your health. This is something that I've been leaning into quite a bit, and it just makes me feel so much better on a daily basis. I do something active outside every single day, whether it's a run or a surf or lifting weights. And I'm a firm believer that once you take care of your physical health, positive mental health will follow. This is huge. Surround yourself with the right people. And I would imagine a bunch of you guys have a very wide variety of groups of friends the same way that I did. You know, you want to be the dumbest person in the room when you're sitting around with your friends, and you want to be talking about important life things. You know, whether it's investing or careers or family or school for your kids or tax strategy, all this kind of stuff. Like being around those people for me has really leveled me up in terms of, you know, the way I live my life. And then lastly, and I think this is pretty um, relevant for today's generation, which is like even my friends, like I'm 37, and like a ton of my friends, I was playing golf with my friend for an example the other day, and he's just on his, and this golf course is beautiful, like the most beautiful views you've ever seen. He's on his cell phone the whole time, you know, kind of just not looking around, texting back and forth, talking on Instagram and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, dude, I'm confiscating your phone. Like, we're playing golf, you're here to visit, like, get off your phone. Um, we don't have to be tied to our phone. I know it's really hard, you know, and I'm guilty of it too. But, you know, one of the things that I would say to you guys is like make an effort and be intentional about trying to be present. Go on a walk and leave your phone at home. Close your computer, close your iPad, take off your Apple Watch, whatever it is, and like just have a face-to-face conversation with someone. Go out to eat with someone. Like being present, I think, will help you guys appreciate um, your lives and your day to day more than like being on social media and saying, oh, you know, I just saw so and so in a private jet and I wish I could do that, or so and so is so pretty or handsome. Like it's, you know, I think the whole social media thing is really lending itself to like a comparing culture where everyone's comparing themselves against these like influencers. And like that's like a zero-sum game in my opinion, because those influencers like probably aren't even as real as we think they are. So that's, I was going to leave you guys with a couple of quotes. You probably noticed like a recurring theme in my deck here, but like I spend a lot of time thinking about like a human life relative to our universe and solar system and galaxy. And it's like the reality is that we are here for like the blink of an eye or the snap of a finger. And you know, whether you live to be 20 years old or 100 years old, like in the general scale and scheme of things, it's like we're really not here for a long time. And we are really blessed to be here. So like the purpose of life for me is to be happy. And once you understand that, I think it makes it a lot easier and top of mind to go to try to make other people happy. Being there for your friends when they're in tough times, being there for your family, being nice to strangers. You know, I think it's pretty funny, but I did want to leave you guys with this. I know like I think it's kind of easy to get stuck in this like rat race mentality when you're in school, where you're like, oh, I'm going to grind and get good grades and get a big job offer. Like, yes, those things are super important. And I highly recommend focusing on them, but like, don't lose sight of what's really important in life. All right, that's basically all I had for slides. I hope I didn't put any of you guys to sleep. I don't know how many people were here when I started. There's 20 now. Hopefully it was a pretty similar number, but feel free to ask me any questions that you guys have, you know, about anything. I'm happy to answer them. And if no one asks me a question, I'm going to randomly pick on someone. So beware.
Start picking.
Actually, let me ask a more specific question. For those of you guys that put, I forget exactly what my question was, but it was basically like, who has considered a career in sales? For those of you, or for one of you that said, yes, you have, can you come off mute and tell me, you know, what are your perceptions of a sales career? What are your concerns? What excites you about it?
There are also a couple questions in chat.
Oh, are there? Okay, let me pull it up.
One was, how did you break into your career? And the other
Oh, yeah.
was, how did moving to different places change your
Yeah.
perspective on life?
Yeah. So Cam, the sales career path is actually pretty like templated, I would say, or like consistent across the board. Basically, you start as what's called a BDR, which is a business development representative. It's a grind. Like the first year or two as a BDR, you're doing outbound emailing, you're prospecting on LinkedIn, trying to find people to reach out to that care about what you're saying, picking up the phone. Basically, you're paid and measured on how many meetings you can set up for your account executive. So every account executive has this BDR. They're basically responsible for booking meetings for the AE. Once you do well and hit your numbers as a BDR, then you get into a closing role, which is an account executive. And that's kind of like a glass ceiling. Once you go from a BDR to a sales rep, you can basically be a sales rep wherever you want, at any company, and you have a ton of flexibility. Your experience is highly sought after. And so once you kind of like break out of being a BDR, that's when the doors will really open up. Yeah, so like in terms of moving to different states, like from Connecticut to California, I wasn't even really like I obviously knew of like Facebook and Google and Microsoft, like these big tech companies in California, but I never really realized like in the Bay Area how how huge they were, right? Like it was when I moved to San Francisco, it's like a tech giant. Like you see all this kind of tech. So, right, like I kind of just assimilated to that culture where all of a sudden I'm working in tech, I'm thinking about tech, I'm talking about tech all the time. I would imagine it would be a similar sort of situation. If I moved to LA, I would probably be in like movies. If I moved to New York City, I'd probably be in finance. So keep that in mind too. Like if you kind of know what industry you want to go into and you're thinking about moving to a big city, like pick the city where that industry is prevalent. It's kind of funny, like since I moved to Hawaii, I it's I still kind of just like can't believe the situation that I'm in, which is, I travel quite a bit for work, but I still live in Hawaii. They don't even like Aloha here is like they don't care what you do for work. They don't care how much money you make. Like they care about like how many waves you caught yesterday and like what you're having for lunch. So I wouldn't say moving to Hawaii has really like um, improved my career or changed my mindset from a career perspective, but like definitely I think where you live plays a big role in terms of like who you hang out with, what you think about, what's important, and all those kinds of stuff. I gotta jump in about 5 minutes. Actually,
Can you put
we'll
up,
do this. I'll keep
can you put up
this.
the QR code for
Yeah, I'll put
attendance,
up the
please?
QR code in 1 sec. The other thing I wanted to say is like, if you guys have questions, want to reach out to me individual or DM me, like feel free to take a screenshot of this, of my contact info. I want to help as many people as I can, so feel free to reach out to me directly. And then I know we had the attendance QR code, so if you guys want to go ahead and scan it and put it in, that would be appreciated.
And if there's one last question, now's your chance. Just a comment that says thank you. And from all of us, thank you, Ryan, for your experience, your inspirational journey and the fact that you've talked to us more about not only your career in sales, but also how to put that along with balance to really enjoy the rest of what life brings. It's fantastic.
Absolutely. I'm happy to be here and thanks for the opportunity. Feel free to reach out to me if you guys have any questions or really anything. I'm also kind of just generally interested in like the world that you guys live in. I mean, it's so different from the world, that I was brought up in. So feel free to reach out to me at any time.
Awesome.